You know this region well, Commander. Who are these protesters?
The protesters are actually the people from the street. They are everyday Egyptians that are out there trying to get what they have been deprived of for years. The Mubarak administration really has stolen from the people for decades now, and the people are finally reaching a tipping point where they've said enough is enough. It is an evolving situation, as the president mentioned last night, but quite frankly, the chief of defense who was here was quite bluntly told that he needs to go back, and the military being out there is being put in a very, very tenuous situation. The police have essentially abandoned the streets at this point, and by them abandoning it, you have a point where the military doesn't have necessarily the tools for crowd control. You went at least from a police force that had tear gas, rubber bullets, water cannons that could try and maintain some degree of crowd control to try and keep the protests contained and somewhat orderly, but the reality of it is with the military, you don't have that luxury anymore. We are trying to tell both the military and the Mubarak administration, this isn't the time to be killing your people. This is the time to figure out how, when there's going to be a peaceful transition to a new regime in power.
Now, what is the difference between what you experienced, Commander, where Yemenis were not big fans of Americans? Certainly the Yemenis authorities weren't big fans of Americans, and this attack, something that actually you had expressed concern, the possibility of such a thing happening, way before it did happen. I mean, so I'm wondering, what is the difference between the government and the people there and the government and the people all these years later in Egypt?
I think what you're seeing, Neil, is that the attack on USS Cole was clearly based on an al-Qaeda terrorist organization that had infiltrated the country, to a degree may have worked in collusion with certain elements within the Yemeni government to carry out a very successful attack against my ship. But here in Egypt, it's quite different. You actually have the people rising up, where you didn't have that kind of support in Yemen trying to overthrow President Saleh. And Mubarak is in a very tough situation right now.
The difference,
I think he realizes that.
But the difference could be, pardon me interrupting, that in the case of Tunisia and the uprisings, al-Qaeda found a way to take advantage of that vacuum and try to, even as we speak, to insert one of their candidates into the void. Now, I don't know whether that will, in fact, ever be the case in Egypt, but how do nefarious characters take advantage of a situation like this and take what might be called a democratic uprising and turn into something else?
Well, I think that's what we're going to see. That's why the United States is trying to convince the Mubarak administration, do not take on the protesters, but figure out how you're going to get them what they need. But they can't do that because, quite frankly, the government is not trusted to give back to the people at this point, because they have a demonstrated track record of 30 years of stealing from the people. Quite frankly, this isn't all Mubarak's decision either. Let's not forget, there are a number of powerful people, especially the Minister of Defense, who has kept him in power during this entire time. When you look at the transition with the cabinet, really will be telling to see whether the Minister of Defense has left or whether he remains in power as one of the key people that is going to influence Mubarak's decisions on how to move forward. And the military, which is well respected by the people, how they're going to deal with it, where they should go, and what they should do. We also have another player in here with the Muslim Brotherhood. You also have another player with Mohammed al-Baradei, the former International Atomic Energy Agency head from the United Nations. He's under house arrest.
Right.
That can only last so long. Eventually, these people are going to get in a position where they're going to speak up, the people are going to follow them, and then we are going to be at the tipping point to see how the transition is going to occur.
Commander, thank you very much.